I'm not sure the world has ever felt as upside down in my lifetime as it has in 2020. A global pandemic and accompanying economic crisis, political division and discord, protests for justice and a better world for all people. And every week, it seems, a new catastrophe, a news story or several that causes us to roll our eyes and think, now this. A year ago, life included parties, happy hours, and travel. Its more mundane activities included public transit, work days in the office, going to church, shopping for groceries, picking the kids up from school, and hugging people. That world is gone now. Every single one of these elements of normal life has been disrupted and turned on its head. Our world now is strange, unfamiliar, and scary. We don't know what the future will hold or how long this season of upheaval and uncertainty will last. Many times in recent months, I've thought that the world is broken, ending even, that everything has become messed up. I've longed for the world I knew before. Despite its imperfections and injustices, it was a world that was largely comfortable for me. The Beatitudes, however, are a reminder that the world as we have generally encountered it is not at all the world that God intends or desires for us. In many ways, God's desired world is an inversion of the world we expect and feel comfortable with and entitled to, particularly those of us who benefit from privilege. With these 8 strange and unexpected blessings, Jesus begins his Sermon on the Mount, throughout which he offers instruction, parable, promise, and command to his followers about the ways that God intends for us to live and the world God calls us to work toward. It's significant that Jesus begins by addressing folks with these inverted blessings. He begins by addressing those who suffer, those who remain faithful in the face of hardship, those who focus themselves on compassion and care for others, on justice and righteousness, on making true peace for a better world for all. These are not the groups of people that our world tends to favor or exalt. In our dog-eat-dog world, the spoils go to the victor, the glory to the powerful. We celebrate those who are dominant, aggressive, competitive. We reward those who prioritize themselves. We avoid those so many times who are suffering. We often reject calls for justice and peace. And we see self-emptying concern for others so many times as just plain weakness. Our misaligned priorities have been painfully, devastatingly evident over the course of this pandemic. As a result, we have a great many more names and lives to remember on this All Saints' Day than we should. In the Beatitudes, Jesus makes a promise that regardless of how this world fails them, God's commonwealth will ultimately comfort and lift up those who are faithful and good. At the end, he speaks directly to his hearers, not only naming abstract groups, but also reassuring those listening that if they also seek to be faithful and good, then no matter how the world mistreats them, God will ultimately be faithful to them. What sort of person is being described by these blessings? Those who mourn do so because they love someone who has been lost. Do we care enough about those who have died in this pandemic to mourn them? Will we care mercifully for those who are being hurt by this situation, whether in terms of health or finances or safety or justice? Will we let ourselves feel the pangs of hunger at the persistence of unrighteousness? Will we do the hard work of making real and holy peace instead of settling for the comfort of keeping a false peace that allows injustices in this world to continue? In times of crisis, our impulse as human beings is to shore up our defenses and do whatever it takes to keep ourselves alive. But God has created us not simply to be mortal, but to be moral. Our call from God is to have a broader vision of care for all people. Those who do this, Jesus says, are blessed. Maybe not in the world that we know, the one that props up powers and principalities, that celebrates individual freedom over collective flourishing, but certainly in the kingdom of God. Our world has been turned upside down, and that upending has meant immense suffering and struggle. I don't imagine any of us would identify a global pandemic as good, nor do I believe God would call it so. But while we've been shaken up, while we're in this space of upheaval, perhaps we can see our reality from a different vantage point. Perhaps we might lean into the discomfort of asking ourselves why we were so comfortable with the world as it was before. Why was that world in so many ways the inverse of the world Jesus illustrates in the Beatitudes? And was it ever right side up in God's eyes? How often since COVID-19 began have you said, I can't wait until life gets back to normal? I've said it more times than I can count. There's nothing wrong with saying it. Of course we want to return to the lives we enjoyed before the virus changed everything. Of course we want to travel again and welcome people into our homes and worship in person in our churches and put away our face masks and send our children to school and hug our loved ones without fearing for their safety. Of course, we want the dread, the isolation, uncertainty, and grief of the past year to fade away. But during this week, when the church celebrates All Souls and All Saints, I've been asking myself some questions. What exactly is normal? Who decides how we define it? Some people grew up hearing that the story about the Beatitudes are, quote, be-attitudes, unquote. Postures, perspectives we should strive to adopt in order to earn favors from God. But when you read the Beatitudes, there is no transactional language in these verses at all. No commandments, no moral injunctions. What Jesus does is simply describe reality, as in, here are the facts. Here's how the world works. Here is an accurate description of life as it truly is. Here is normal. God's normal. Maybe the real question to ask about the Beatitudes is not, have I worked hard enough to merit God's blessing? Maybe it's, do I trust that God's description of reality is accurate? Do I believe in Jesus' version of normal life enough to test all of my versions against his? Jesus claims that the poor, the mournful, the meek, the hungry, the merciful, the pure-hearted, the peaceful, and the persecuted are blessed. They are the lucky ones, the ones whose lives are aligned with the heart and character of God. They're the ones who will enter heaven, experience comfort, inherit the earth, be filled, receive mercy, see God, and be called the children of God. God's normal is not the normal I see and experience in the world around me. I live in a world where the loudest, strongest, wealthiest, and most privileged people often prey on the less fortunate. I live in a world where greed and selfishness pay big time, while meekness, mercy, and mournfulness earn little more than contempt. I live in a world where securing my own ease and comfort is my right. The rest of the world be damned. But Jesus recognizes this disparity and addresses it in the very wording of the Beatitudes. Blessed are, for they will be. The language is prophetic and eschatological. It bridges the present and the future, the now and the not yet, the kingdom that is and the kingdom that is coming. The blessing is here. God's favor is now. But its fulfillment still lies ahead. As we remember and honor on this All Saints' Day those who have gone before us, we celebrate the unbreakable communion between past, present, and future. We draw comfort, resilience, and hope from the fact that countless others have mourned, hungered, thirsted, and grieved in years past, and gone on from their struggles to the fullness of life in God's presence. Tim Beach Verhey says, "The saints provide a glimpse of God's already in the midst of our not yet." Do I believe in Jesus' version of God's normal? Do I believe that the people who care profoundly, the people who yearn, mourn, hunger, thirst, suffer, and speak for justice are the most fortunate people on earth? Do I see or even look for blessing in the world's most reviled, wretched, starving, grieving, shamed, and broken human beings? Or do I find their desperation, their passion, and their suffering embarrassing, excessive, undignified? The amazing thing about the people Jesus describes in the Beatitudes is that they want without reservation or apology. They want justice. They want peace. They want solace. They want healing. Even in the face of oppression, pain, loss, and sorrow, they don't give up wanting or living in ways that bear witness to that wanting. There's nothing half-baked or shallow about them. What Jesus describes is a world turned upside down by passionate conviction, intensity, desire. An economy of blessing that sounds ludicrous to those who refuse to feel so deeply. A reordering of priority and privilege that the church has found awkward, even offensive for centuries. Do we find it offensive too? If we don't, what should we do next? Wallow in guilt? Romanticize poverty? Avoid joy? I don't think so. The very fact that Jesus spends his days and nights on earth alleviating suffering in every way possible suggests that he doesn't believe in misery for its own sake. Pain in and of itself is neither holy nor redemptive in the Christian story. Jesus' ministry is all about healing, abundance, liberation, and wholeness. Maybe the question to ask is a question about trust, about aligning my heart with Christ's. I might begin by accepting on faith that Jesus is telling me the truth, that his definition of reality is correct and mine is not. I might come clean about the fact that most of the time, I don't care nearly as much as the blessed of the Beatitudes care. I'm not desperate for God. I'm not keenly aware of God's active daily intervention in my life. I'm not on my knees with need, ache, sorrow, longing, gratitude, or love. Why would I be? I've got plenty to eat. I live in a comfortable home. Even during this time of global illness and sorrow, I have both health and health insurance. My children are safe. I have access to a vibrant social, intellectual, and recreational life. I'm not in dire need of anything. There isn't much in my circumstances that leads me to a sense of urgency about ultimate things. I can go for days without talking to God. I can go days without thinking about God. It's very easy, embarrassingly easy, for all things deep and divine to become afterthoughts in my life because God isn't necessary on my 24/7 radar. This isn't because I'm callous. It's because I'm full. So full that I barely register the hunger beneath the fullness. It's because I have easy access to laughter and therefore don't wonder what lessons tears might teach me. It's because I'm primed by my cozy life to live in the shallows, unaware of the treasures that await me in the depths. Most of the time, it just plain doesn't occur to me that I would be lost, utterly and wholly lost, without the grace that sustains me. I think what Jesus is saying is that I have something to learn about discipleship that my life circumstances will not teach me. Something to grasp about the beauty and freedom of the Christian life that I will never grasp until God becomes my everything, my all, my starting place, my ending place. Something to humbly admit about the limitations of my privilege. Something to recognize about God's priorities, God's promises. Something to notice about the power of plenty to blind me to my own emptiness. Something to gain from the humility that says, the people being blessed in the Beatitudes have everything to teach me. Maybe it's time to sit down and pay attention to them. Frederick Buechner writes, the world says, mind your own business. And Jesus says, there is no such thing as your own business. The world says, follow the wisest course and be a success. And Jesus says, follow me and be crucified. The world says, drive carefully. The life you save may be your own. And Jesus says, whoever would save his life will lose it. And whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. The world says law and order. And Jesus says, love. The world says, get. And Jesus says, give. In terms of the world's sanity, Buechner writes, Jesus is crazy as a coot, and anybody who thinks he can follow him without being a little crazy too is laboring less under a cross and more under a delusion. This is not prosperity theology. This is not blessing as health, wealth, and happiness. This is a teaching so costly, so unpalatable, that most of us will do anything to domesticate it or ignore it. Eventually, our lives will return to normal. We'll manufacture and distribute vaccines. We'll find better medicines and treatments. We'll put our face masks away. We'll venture out of our houses and cities. We'll grieve the dead. And we'll heal. We'll move on. But even when that time comes, the challenge and the invitation of Jesus' Beatitudes will remain. Will God's normal become ours? Will we align our priorities with God's heart? Will we bless what matters most to God? If this is the end of the world as we've known it, what new and better world might we allow to begin? Blessed are, for they will be. My prayer is that God will give us the faith to believe it, that we will believe, follow, and live God's normal, that the new and better world will come, that the day will come when it will be said of all of us, blessed are they, the peacemakers, the creators of justice, love, and good for all, for they will be called the children of God. Thanks be to God. Amen.